I do remember signing up for my first exam, and it was a bit daunting because I didn't know what to expect at all.
I remember a colleague at the time saying to me, just give it a go, you've paid for it now, just go and sit it and use it as a trial run.
As soon as I pass the exam, then it kind of motivates me again to continue, keep going.
It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of resilience, but it's worth it in the end.
Hello, I'm Kritika Adatia and I'm a chartered accountant. I now support accountancy students through their training. And as an educator, I'm regularly up close and personal with some of the common issues people face while studying for and sitting their accountancy exams. So in this series for the ACCA, I've been chatting to experts about strategies we can all use when facing some of life's challenges. And for this final episode of the series, we're doing something special. We're speaking to an ACCA education expert about how to get on with booking and sitting your exams, as well as someone who has just successfully passed all their exams. What do the stats tell us about how to feel prepared? What resources are available to you through your ACCA journey? And how do you push yourself to take that first step? This is On Your Marks, because you'll never know until you try. Now, as an educator with ACCA, this is a topic close to my heart. Working in the Education Solutions team at ACCA means I have a lot of direct contact with students, whether through webinars, social events, and the ACCAX product, which I manage. I'm always moved by stories of perseverance and success, as I know these exams can be a real challenge. They certainly were for me when I sat them several years ago. So it's always particularly heartwarming to me when I find out that a specific resource or initiative that I've contributed to has helped someone achieve a passing result. So today I'm going to be unpicking what these resources are with Paul Kirkwood. He's the Regional Head of Education and Learning for ACCA in the UK. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Kritika. Lovely to be here today.
And Shaun Fenwick. He works in the accounting team at Brixton Brewery and has just found out he's passed all his exams in the last couple of months. Hello, Shaun.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Amazing. So great to have you both here with us. Now, Shaun, I'm going to kick off with a question that's about how you're feeling now that you've just passed your exams.
I feel, brilliant, amazing. A weight's been lifted off the shoulder. Not really sure what to do next, to be honest. I've got my result a couple of weeks ago, and looking forward to what the next chapter is, really.
Amazing. You must feel like you have so much time on your hands now.
Well, that's the thing I do. And previously I've got my exam result. I'm right, okay, let's book the next exam. Now I'm like, okay, what next? So I'm just looking forward to seeing what that will look like.
Brilliant. I'm so excited for you, Shaun, and thank you for joining us once again. Now, Paul, coming to you, when it comes to deciding to pursue the ACCA qualification, we know that in itself is quite a big step. And the flexibility of the qualification means that individuals can start at different points and not everyone's journey is going to be the same. So can you tell us a little bit about the entry routes into the qualification and the decisions that students might have to make?
Yeah, of course. The flexibility is one of the ACCA's big advantages, but it does and can create a little bit of some problems, because it can lead to a little bit of procrastination because you've got to make those choices. There's a few areas that I could talk about very briefly. First of which is the entry point. So students can come in at the very start of the qualification, but actually, if you've done some prior learning, you can get credit for that. They're called exemptions. It's not the greatest name, but you can get credit for prior learning. And that means you can get or bypass some of the earlier exams. So we've got potentially different starting points, but also in the main qualification, there's 3 levels, and each level's got a number of exams, and you don't have to take them in a specific order. So as well as having to perhaps have different starting points, you've also got to choose your first exam and get going with the qualification. And then finally, there's many different ways to study as well. Whether you're going to study yourself or, as we recommend, with a learning partner, and then with a learning partner, are you going to do home study? Are you going to do distance learning? Are you going to do a face-to-face course or an online course? There are a lot of choices, but there's a lot of support and resources to help you make those decisions.
And I'm sure we'll come on to that. But it's really interesting that you mentioned procrastination because we've recorded another episode where we talk specifically about that. And actually, Shaun, I want to come to you. Do you remember making some of the decisions that Paul's referring to? And what's your journey been like?
I do, yes. My journey started off with AAT, which was my prior learning to ACCA, and as Paul touched on, I then qualified for those exemptions, and I was exempted from the first 3 papers, which is that sort of level 1 of the qualification. So I entered ACCA in the level 2 phase. So yeah, I got some of those exemptions, which Paul mentioned earlier.
Great. And just going to touch on a question there because you mentioned exemptions. Reflecting back on it, were the exemptions something that you feel helped you to get to qualification quicker? If you had to make that decision again, would you take the exemption?
Certainly helped me get the qualification quicker. The exemptions I was entitled to were sort of very similar exams to those which I studied in the level 4 AAT course. So if I had have sat those exams, I would have felt like I was probably duplicating my learning. Hence the reason why I got those exemptions.
So just coming back to that point, with exemptions, just want to call out that obviously you took them because you'd already studied the AAT. It's important to note that obviously if you're going to take exemptions, you want to make sure you can brush up on the technical content. Now, Paul, just coming back to you on a question, we know that students often have fears and struggles when they're starting off. So can you talk to us a little bit about what those common fears and struggles might be?
Absolutely. I think the first point is it's the fear of the unknown. Everyone is going to be a little bit nervous when they take that first exam. I think for a lot of students as well who've come through a typical education route, they may not have done computer-based exams, so fully computer-based exams ever before. And so at ACCA, all of the exams are computer-based. But for each of the levels, there are practice environments for our students to practice in the real environment that they will be sitting their exam. So there's support, as we said, at each step of the way. So we've got, maybe fear of that unknown with an exam, but also I think fear of failure as well. And again, I'm reflecting back on my journey through the qualification when I did it, and you do have that absolute fear of failure, especially if in your past academic career you might not have failed anything in it ever before. Yet at ACCA, there's no grades, there's no A to F, there's no a score that you get, which means anything other than pass or fail. So I think that fear of failure is something we need to get over and just take that first step. But it's something that we will support students on their journey with.
Amazing. And is that some of the fears, Shaun, that you can resonate with? I know certainly the fear of failure is something that really was a challenge for me when I was going through this journey. So
Yeah, likewise. My biggest fear, to be honest, was probably the commitment to having to study for the next 3 to 4 plus years and not knowing when I might finish my journey. But you can overcome that. It's a full qualification. You don't actually need to sit every exam in one go. You can take a break, etc. So that kind of removed that fear, if you like, knowing that. But yeah, the fear of failure was, of course, always a fear. But you've just got to, I don't know, just got to book the exam and hope you don't fail.
yeah, it's almost like you don't want to think about what the result is going to be. Focus on the goal. You book your exam,
That's it.
get
Yeah.
cracking on with the studies. And actually, speaking of that, Paul,
Mhm.
you mentioned support resources that are available to students as they're starting off. So can you tell us a little bit more about what those resources might be and how they can help?
Yeah, and so there's a number of resources that ACCA supply. But there's also resources from our learning providers. So I think one of the big things for a new student to the qualification is to make themselves aware of all the support that is available to them. They'll get support from their learning providers. They'll also get support from their employers, perhaps as well. And then you've got the resources that ACCA give you. And at ACCA, we try to take you through a little bit of planning, so to help you plan for your next step, because ACCA, as you mentioned, Shaun, can take a number of years. It's not just a 1 year journey. For most, it's going to be 3-4 years or sometimes longer. So planning ahead and planning little milestones. So we've got help around that planning for our students. But there's also support in the learning phase. So at ACCA, we've got recently launched the Study Hub, which is a fantastic online study text and question bank that students are loving at the moment to help them prepare for their exam. And then for that revision phase as well, I mentioned that we've got support in the real computer environment that all of our exams are in. So again, for planning, for learning, for revision, there's support from ACCA, which just underpins the support you get from your learning providers as well.
That's really great. Now, you mentioned the planning element, and we also did an episode on planning. And I like that you called out, sort of having those smaller goals to work
Mm.
towards. Obviously, you've got the bigger goal of booking that exam, but, having a compass planning tool that will help you break down what your goals are sounds great. Now, Shaun, just listening to some of what Paul has just referenced, were any of those resources that you made use of? What helped you
Yeah,
get started?
yeah, they were. Earlier on in my start my journey at ACCA, I was relying heavily on the training provider and the materials available through them. But later on in my journey, I self-taught and self-studied, and I relied heavily on the ACCA materials. So I've seen a bit of both. Those that So one of the fears we touched on earlier was the fear of sitting a computer-based exam. For me, I'd come from sort of A levels into my accounting career, and I was very much used to just pen and paper in an exam hall. So the computer exam was quite daunting, or the thought of this computer exam was quite daunting. But as Paul touched on, there's the ACCA practice platform, which is like a real life exam environment, and I was on that platform most weeks, just familiarize myself with the platform really, and that really eased my fear of that computer-based exam.
Amazing. Actually thinking back to when I was a tutor and the exams changed from paper to computer based, Paul, wasn't that quite a scary transition having to actually teach students that, hey, now the exams are on computer? So I don't think it's just the students, it was the
Oh,
learning providers having to adapt as well.
completely agree. And ACCA does pride itself in pushing the boundaries and making sure that the qualification is up to date. So I think I'm very proud of that as well. But it does mean that we've got to be constantly thinking about how we support our students. And we see the results. We can see who uses the practice platform, and there's such a strong correlation between students that use the resources available and their exam success. So a real tip, we've mentioned it twice now, or I've mentioned it twice, is making sure that you're aware of what's available. So at that start of the journey, you've got some time. So spend some time looking at what's available to support you for the exam that you choose to do first. And we've said it, just take that first
Mm,
step.
yep.
Now, just circling back to something that you mentioned earlier about the fear of failure. And, when you make a plan to become a chartered accountant, a qualified accountant, it might be that your plan doesn't always go as you had hoped. You might have setbacks along the way. So, Paul, what would your advice be around plans not going as they might do?
When we say not going as well as they might do, life gets in the way. It really does, whether that's work or whether it is your home life. And that's not just about not taking an exam. Sometimes Sean mentioned the need just to take some time out and maybe miss an exam sitting just so you can get back on track and give your full time and devotion that exam needs to pass. But if you do fail, and I'll put my hands up, I failed 2 exams on my route to qualification, and I learned from both of them. They were painful. There's nothing wrong when you don't get that first success. To not feel You feel hurt, you feel a little bit of anger. I felt anger. Certainly wasn't my fault for the first couple of days, but then you reflect, and there are resources. You will get support, and it's by speaking to people around you, whether that's your learning provider, as we've talked about. They will support you to help you get back on track. ACCA does as well. It will send out support, whether it comes in the form of webinars or podcasts or vodcasts. It has got help for and advice for people to really think, reflect, and make the changes needed just to make the difference when you come to sit that exam the next time. So yes, it is a fail. The way the exams are structured, you get a pass mark or you get a fail mark. But really, and anyone who does get that fail mark, there's so much learning to be made from it, and it will stand you in good stead for future exams.
Well, firstly, thank you, Paul, for sharing that you didn't pass two of your exams. And I'm sure a lot of listeners listening to this will feel sort of refreshed by hearing that. And Sean, I want to ask you, have you had any failures along the
Yeah,
way?
exactly the same. I failed 2 exams myself, and one of the hardest parts of the qualification I felt was bouncing back and just getting back to study mode. Um, it is disappointing. You put in all of that effort, all that time studying and revising, but there's so many variables that come into play when you're going into that exam hall. You just got to kind of overcome those, and as Paul said, just learn from them, resit it, and carry on. That's one of the beauties of the qualification, I feel, is that there's so much flexibility. And yes, you might fail, but you can resit that exam. You can resit it. In the next sitting, you can actually start a new exam and then come back to that exam. One of my top tip would just be to try and overcome that and just resit it and go again.
So, what kept you motivated? You mentioned you failed two exams as well. So, what was it that kept you going?
Well, it was difficult to get going straight away, but I did, and I think having those smaller milestones and being like, right, and okay, that's my next target, and that kind of kept me going. And my targets were broken down. So yes, the overall goal was to finish the entire qualification, but one of my goals would be to finish the first 4 exams, for example. So if that's the 3rd exam that I failed, that's fine. That's not my goal wasn't to sit this 3rd exam, it was to sit the 4th exam. So let me just get the next one done,
And that's
So yeah, just having those milestones.
And that's great that you've mentioned those milestones. And just something we spoke about in an earlier episode as well was just that kind of reframing that you have. So, to keep going and just thinking, I just haven't passed
Mm.
yet,
Mm.
but that
Mm.
will come eventually, right?
Yep.
And here you are, have passed all
Yeah,
your
exactly.
exam. That's
Yeah,
brilliant, right?
exactly. Yeah. So,
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for this conversation. And before we wrap up, just want to come on to summarizing 3 things,
Mhm.
Paul, that you would advise students to focus on when they're starting out.
Okay, but the first one you mentioned, setting those small milestones. So I'm going to build on that concept and make sure you celebrate that success. So whether it's whatever that success looks like for you, and it can come in many different forms, but make sure you do celebrate it, because it can be a long journey, but it does aid that extra motivation, and it's a really good way to bounce back, like that bounce back concept, to bounce back from failure with that target of getting through. So set those milestones and celebrate success. I'd also say that the next one is spend that little bit of time working out the resources that are available to you. So dealing with that perhaps nervousness about, have I got enough support to get me through? Yes, there is. But you've got to find it. You've got to look for it a little bit. And then thirdly, and this is the final thing, and the biggest thing for me, is book an exam. If you can book that exam, it sets a line in the sand. You've got something to aim for. You're committed. Just go for it.
Love it. And a similar thing with, sort of 3 areas of focus for students when they're starting out, Sean.
number one would be to book the exam for me. Book the exam and work backwards, and then build your revision plan around that. That's what I felt. It's very easy to not have an exam booked and study, and you just always got that feeling in your mind that, oh, I might not be ready to sit this exam. Just book it. That would be my number one, focus. Second focus would probably be to start building a network of colleagues and peers and other students, tutors, etc. Because it would be the people around you that really get you through the qualification. It'll be those people which are able to help you when you do fail, etc. So that would be number 2, and then number 3 would probably be just enjoy the journey, and commit some time to studying, but also make some free time available. To have fun with your friends, go on holiday, etc.
I love
Just don't work too hard towards your studying, and then make sure you give some time to it for yourself.
Sorry, I got excited. I was going to interrupt there because you said enjoy the journey, Paul, right? And I think that's really
Brilliant.
important, isn't it? We are so fixated on the end result that we want to qualify that we forget that actually it's a journey and that we ought to enjoy it in the process. So thank you for sharing that.
It's very easy to get bogged down in study textbooks and have a plan which is just right. Saturday and Sunday I need to go to the library and I need to revise. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, in the evenings, I'm going to pick up that study textbook. It's very easy to just get bogged down with studying and sitting exams, especially when the windows are every quarter. You're always working in a 3-month timetable, right? For me, my journey wasn't as simple as just sitting an exam every quarter. I took some time for myself. There was actually a sort of a 12-month period where I only sat 2 exams, but that was really helpful for me and really beneficial for my journey. There was lots going on. I was starting a new job and I was moving homes, etc. So it is important to realize that you've got all the time, and you've got a lot of time. You've got all the time in the world, and there's no rush.
I mean, I could echo that point. I think it's so important when you're doing your detailed planning. You mentioned that, Shaun, in terms of start with your exam and work backwards. Get the time in that you will be spending with your family, with your friends. Block that time out. You can't block too much out. We know that, but that's so important because these are the people who are around you, and you mentioned it earlier, who will support you. So make sure you do give time for yourself and your friends and your family along the way. You know, I hesitate to say that I enjoyed my journey to qualification, but there's no better day than the day that I got that final result, and I can remember it. You know, to this day, I can remember getting that final result. You've passed. You've done it, and it was all worthwhile, undoubtedly.
Yeah, definitely no comparable feeling to that. That's it from this series of On Your Marks. Thank you, Paul and Shaun, for chatting with me today. For more information about ACCA exams, you can go to www.accaglobal.com/exams. I'm Kritika Adatia, and this has been On Your Marks.